Before you open anything else, open this one first." My brother Dean stood up at my birthday dinner, holding a wrapped box, grinning like he was about to deliver the punchline of the century. The whole table was watching. "I got you a DNA test. Figured it's time you finally find out whose kid you actually are." Laughter. My cousin pulled out her phone to record. My mother looked down at her plate. My father said nothing, not a single word. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a joke. It was a message, and every single person at that table had already agreed on it. My name is Colette. I'm 27 years old. I work from home as a medical transcriptionist. It's not glamorous. It's not the kind of job people brag about at dinner parties. But it's steady, it's honest, and it pays my bills without needing a single dollar from anyone in my family. I'm the youngest of 3 kids. My brothers, Dean and Trevor, came first. Then 7 years later, I showed up. And from the very beginning, I was different. My hair was darker. My build was smaller. My face didn't quite match the family photo the way theirs did. And my family never, ever let me forget that. See, my mother and father had a brief separation right around the time I was conceived. They got back together eventually, but the rumors never went away. Nobody in the family ever confirmed anything. Nobody denied it either. They just let it sit there like smoke in a closed room. My brothers got college funds. I got hand-me-downs. They got birthday parties with decorations and guests and cakes with their names on them. I got an afterthought dinner and a card signed by whoever remembered. I was always the question mark. The one they weren't quite sure about. The one they tolerated but never truly welcomed. I wasn't the one they celebrated or invested in. I was the one they kept around out of obligation. But I had something none of them ever bothered to look for, because they were too busy looking down. If you've ever been the one your family treated like an outsider in your own home, like you had to earn a seat at a table you were born at, subscribe. I want to hear your story in the comments. You deserve to be seen. Let's go. I didn't want a party for my 27th birthday. I told my mother that. I said a quiet dinner, just us, maybe takeout. But she insisted. "It's important to keep family traditions," she said. So I showed up at my parents' house expecting something small. Instead, I walked into a dining room full of people. Both brothers were there, their wives, a handful of cousins, my parents at the head of the table. The food was nice, the decorations were fine, but the energy in the room felt rehearsed, like everyone was in on something I wasn't. After we finished eating, Dean stood up. He was 34 and had always acted like the head of the family, even though our father was still alive and sitting right there. He grabbed a wrapped box from behind his chair and held it up like a trophy. "Come on, Colette," he said. "You've always wondered. We've all wondered. Let's just finally put it to rest. Are you even one of us?" The room went quiet for half a second. Then Trevor, my other brother, laughed from across the table. He was 31 and always followed Dean's lead. "Yeah," Trevor said. "Maybe we'll finally find out whose mistake you were." I looked at my mother. She stared at her plate. I looked at my father. He cleared his throat and said, "It's just a joke, Colette. Don't make it a thing." My cousin kept filming. She was giggling behind her phone like this was entertainment. I pushed the DNA kit back across the table. "I don't need a test to know who I am," I said quietly. Dean smirked. "That's exactly what someone who's scared of the answer would say." The table laughed again. Every single one of them. I excused myself and walked to the bathroom. I locked the door, sat on the edge of the bathtub, and pressed my hands against my knees to stop them from shaking. The faucet was dripping. I remember that sound. Drip, 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 louder than all the laughter still ringing in my ears. Then I heard voices in the hallway. Dean and Trevor. They didn't know I could hear them. Dean said, "If the test comes back wrong, we can finally cut her out of everything. Dad's already talking about the house and the accounts. She doesn't need to be part of that." My stomach dropped. It wasn't a joke. It was never a joke. The DNA test was a legal strategy. They wanted proof that I wasn't blood so they could erase me from every financial document the family had. I dried my eyes. I stood up straight. And something inside me shifted. I walked back to the table, picked up the DNA kit and smiled. You know what? I'll take the test. Dean grinned wide. He thought he had won. 2 weeks after my birthday, I got a notification from the bank. The joint savings account my father had set up for me years ago, the one he said was for emergencies, had been closed. My name was removed. No phone call, no warning, no explanation. I called my father and asked him what happened. He sighed like I was bothering him. It's just estate planning, Colette. Don't read into it. But I did read into it. I started digging, and what I found made my stomach turn. The family home, 2 rental properties my father owned, and a separate savings account had all been moved into a trust. The beneficiaries were Dean and Trevor. Only Dean and Trevor. My name appeared nowhere. It was like I had already been erased before the DNA results even came back. 3 weeks later, I went to my cousin's baby shower. I didn't want to go, but I told myself I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let them push me into a corner. That was a mistake. Halfway through the party, I walked past a group of relatives and heard Dean's wife, Lauren, talking. She wasn't whispering. She wanted me to hear it. Honestly, it's kind of brave of Colette to even show up to family events like Lauren said, holding her drink like she was making a toast. I mean, we all know the situation. I stopped walking. I turned around and looked at her. What situation, Lauren? She shrugged. I'm just saying what everyone thinks. Before I could respond, Trevor stepped in. She's not wrong, Colette. Maybe stop pretending. I looked at my mother. She was standing 6 feet away, holding a paper plate, staring at the floor. She said nothing. Again. A few days after the baby shower, Dean called me. His voice was casual, almost friendly, which made it worse. Hey, just checking in about that DNA test. Did you send it off yet? I told him I was handling it. Cool, he said. Just make sure you use the one I gave you. I know a guy who runs the lab. He can fast-track the results. That's when it clicked. The testing service Dean wanted me to use was connected to a lawyer friend of his. The results wouldn't just be personal. They would be funneled directly into a legal case. Dean confirmed it without even realizing. If the results are clean, great. But if they're not, it's better for everyone to know now, right? Before Dad's estate becomes a legal mess. The meaning was obvious. Prove your blood or you get nothing. But here's what they didn't understand. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't call anyone crying. Instead, I started saving every text message. I recorded every phone call. I took screenshots of every group chat message. I journaled every conversation with dates and details. They thought silence meant I was weak. They thought I was sitting in a corner somewhere falling apart. But every night after work I was building my case. Not just for inheritance, for the truth. And I started reaching out to people outside the family. People who remembered things my brothers thought everyone had forgotten. What they didn't know was that I had been collecting everything. Long before that birthday dinner, long before the DNA kit and the laughter and the cruelty, I had noticed things that didn't add up. I'm a transcriptionist. My entire job is about details, about catching what other people miss. And about 1.5 years before my birthday, I started noticing irregularities in how my family handled money. The 2 rental properties my father owned on Elm Street and Waverley Avenue were generating income that never appeared on any tax filing I'd seen. My father collected cash payments from tenants under the table. Dean and Trevor had access to a second bank account tied to my father's small construction business, and money was moving through it in ways that didn't make sense. So I started documenting, quietly, carefully. I built spreadsheets. I saved screenshots of text messages where Dean discussed hiding income with my father. I saved a voicemail from Trevor where he told my father to keep Colette off the books so she doesn't ask questions. I had everything organised, dated, and backed up in 3 different places. And then there was the DNA test. I did take one, but not Dean's version, not through his lawyer friend's lab. I used my own service, a reputable one. The results came back clear as daylight. Full paternal match. I am my father's biological daughter. 100%. No question at all. I had the truth in one hand and their lies in the other. And they had no idea I was holding either. I didn't tell anyone about the DNA results. I let Dean and Trevor keep scheming. I let them keep assuming the results would go their way. They were so focused on proving I didn't belong that they forgot to cover their own tracks. And I had every single footprint saved. I organized it all into one folder. Digital and physical copies. I labeled it simply, Family Business. There was one person in my life who saw me clearly. Not as the question mark, not as the outsider, just as Colette. Her name was Dr. Nadine Osei. She was my supervisor at the medical transcription company. A retired physician who had moved into healthcare administration. She was sharp, she was connected, and she had always treated me with a kind of respect that felt foreign because I wasn't getting it anywhere else. When things got bad, really bad, I sat down with Dr. Osei in her office one afternoon and told her everything. Not for sympathy, for guidance. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "You don't need their approval, Colette. You need a plan. And you need the right attorney." She gave me the name of a tax and estate attorney she knew personally. Someone who specialized in family trust disputes and financial fraud. I called him the next day. He reviewed my evidence over 2 meetings. His conclusion was direct. The trust restructuring had likely been done improperly, and the unreported rental income and cash payments were a serious legal problem for my father and brothers. He told me my options. I listened carefully, and I chose one. Meanwhile, my family got louder. Dean started texting the family group, chat, the one I was still in, sending jokes about the new family tree and memes about paternity tests. Trevor's wife posted an Instagram story that read, "Family is about blood, period," with a blood drop emoji. They were so confident, so sure they had already won. Then my father called me. His voice was tired but firm. "If you just step back quietly," he said, "no one has to get embarrassed. I'll make sure you get a little something. But the bulk goes to your brothers. That's just how it is." I paused. Then I said, "I understand, Dad. I just want what's fair." He took that as surrender. He called Dean right after and told him, "She's fine. She won't fight it." They thought I folded. They thought the conversation was over, but I wasn't folding. I was setting the table for a meal they didn't even know was being cooked. Dean arranged the meeting himself. He picked the date, the time, and the location. A formal sit-down at the family attorney's office to finalize the trust and officially settle the estate plan. He invited me as a formality. He expected me to walk in, sign the paperwork that gave up my claims, and walk out quietly. Everyone was there. Dean, Trevor, their wives, my mother and father. The family's longtime attorney sitting at the head of a long conference table with folders laid out in front of him. The room smelled like leather and old coffee. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound when I walked in. I was calm. I wore a navy blazer and carried a single folder under my arm. Dean glanced at it and smirked. Trevor leaned over to his wife and whispered, "This'll be quick." The attorney started reviewing the trust documents. He hadn't gotten through the first page before Dean interrupted. "Before we get into it," Dean said, leaning back in his chair, "Colette, did you ever take that DNA test? Because if you're not blood, this whole meeting is kind of irrelevant for you." Every head turned toward me. I opened my folder. I pulled out the first document and slid it across the table. "Full paternal match," I said. "I'm Dad's daughter, 100%. So let's put that lie to rest right now." The room went silent. Dean's face dropped. The smugness vanished like someone had flipped a switch. Trevor shifted in his chair. My mother closed her eyes and pressed her fingers against her temples. My father stared at the paper like he was reading a language he didn't understand. I didn't stop. "Now, since we're all here being honest," I said, "let's talk about the rental income from the Elm Street and Waverley properties that was never reported to the IRS. Let's talk about the cash payments Dad's been collecting off the books for 6 years." I held up a printed screenshot. "And let's talk about this text where Dean tells Dad to keep Colette off the books so she doesn't ask questions." I slid a second folder across the table to the family attorney. I've also shared copies of everything with my own attorney, and with a CPA who specialises in tax compliance. Dean's chair scraped against the floor as he leaned forward. You recorded us, he said, his voice cracking. You went behind our backs? I looked at him. My voice was steady. You gave me a DNA test at my birthday dinner and called me another man's mistake, in front of my whole family. You went behind my back for years, I just kept receipts. My father turned pale. He looked at Dean. You told me she didn't know about any of this. Dean's jaw tightened. She wasn't supposed to. The family attorney set down his pen. He paused the meeting and advised everyone in the room to seek independent legal counsel before proceeding. Then he looked at me, and his voice dropped low enough that only I could hear. You should have been treated better, he said. I'm sorry. I stood up. I looked at both of my brothers. I never wanted to take anything from you, I said. I just wanted to be treated like I existed. You couldn't even do that. I picked up my folder, turned around, and walked out of that office. No tears, no rage, just clarity. In the weeks that followed, the trust was contested and eventually restructured. My name was added as an equal beneficiary right next to Dean and Trevor. The attorney recommended it. The threat of the tax evidence being escalated made sure nobody argued. Dean and Trevor were forced to amend years of financial filings. They faced penalties. Their relationship with my father didn't break because of me. It broke because their schemes were finally out in the open, and my father saw exactly how far his sons had gone. Not to protect the family, to protect themselves. My mother called me one evening. She was crying. She didn't apologise for the affair rumours, because those rumours were never true. She apologised for never standing up for me. For every dinner where she looked at her plate instead of looking at her daughter. I listened. I didn't forgive her yet. But I didn't hang up. I kept working. I started saving with my rightful share. And I began volunteering with a local women's advocacy group, helping other people navigate family financial abuse. Because I know what it feels like to be erased by the people who are supposed to love you. Dr. O.C. told me something I'll never forget. You didn't burn the house down, Colette. You just opened the windows and let the truth in. I spent my whole life being treated like a question. Turns out, I was the only one in that family with answers. If your own family ever used your identity, your place, your blood, your belonging, as a weapon against you, I see you. That kind of betrayal cuts different. Subscribe to this channel because this is a space for people who refuse to disappear. Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, your worth is not determined by the people who failed to see it. It's determined by what you do when you finally see it yourself.